So about 4 months ago, I canceled my Spotify subscription. I've had it since 2016 and I said, no more. I canceled it, I quit, and now I am a man without a streaming service. I'm listening to my own music, and today I wanted to talk about 3 ways which that has changed my music listening habits, and I think for the better. So let's get into it. If you don't know me, I'm Spencer, and I like to talk about simple living, frugality, and ways in which you can cut down on your technology usage, sometimes by using other technologies. So to say exactly why I quit Spotify in the first place, it's not exactly clear. I was just kind of sick of paying the recurring expense. Every month I was paying like 10 bucks a month to Spotify, and at the end of each month, you know how much music I owned? Zero. Zilch. So I decided I wanted to change that and I wanted to go back to owning my music catalog once again, not just renting for the rest of my life. I'm a huge music fan, I'm a musician, and I used to work at a CD store as well, and I had a huge CD collection back in the day before I got into Spotify. But like many people, once I moved over to Spotify for a little while and I was satisfied with the extent of their offerings, I got rid of almost all of my albums. In the past couple of years, I've been regaining a physical music catalog through buying things like vinyl. I've bought a couple CDs here and there, but mainly it has been records. And I can't explain how nice it is just to know that whatever happens, I have this music. This is physical, this is here, and you can't take it away from me. So just a week or two ago, I was on a work trip with one of my friends. We were traveling in a cube truck, bringing this gear for this TV show that I'm working on to the other side of the country, over to the West Coast. We'd go back and forth playing music from each other's devices, his from Spotify and mine from my local music catalog. And it got me thinking about a few ways which my music habits have actually changed from going back to listening to my music once again, not just music that I was renting from Spotify. So let's get into that with number one. So the first thing that I really noticed about getting rid of Spotify and going back to listening to my own local catalog once again was that I've been listening to full albums once again, which is something that hasn't happened to me honestly since I started listening with Spotify. I think a lot of people do this. With Spotify, you have access to so much music. When you get into an artist, you'll often find their best song, which is listed on the artist homepage. You'll listen to that, maybe you'll go to the album and you'll find one more song that you like, and that's kind of the extent of it. You'll move on to another artist, maybe a related artist, and then you'll keep listening. But you're usually only listening to that artist's hits. There are one or two songs and maybe something else that's popular. I think the almost infinite level of catalog that you have with Spotify, it almost lends itself well to this listening to single songs from each artist, because there's not a lot of incentive for you to go deeper into their catalog because there's just so much more out there. But looking back on it, I was missing out on so many awesome tracks because I had such unlimited options. I never dug deep into each album that I listened to. Nowadays, because I don't have this infinite catalog waiting for me that I'm renting each month, I find myself digging deeper into each of the albums that I do have, and I end up liking the tracks a lot. There's a lot of songs that I would never have gotten to, albums that I've had for years or that I've listened to songs from for years that I just hadn't gone 2 tracks deeper past the hit. And there's another sleeper song that I really enjoy, something that I would never have done on Spotify. So moving on to the second reason that deleting Spotify has changed my music habits is that I'm going back into my catalog and I'm listening to older albums that I haven't touched for a very long time just because I have a limited catalog. People have commented to me that you can't buy every song that you have on Spotify, it's just too expensive. That's the benefit of renting from them. And you know what? That is fair enough. It is a really good deal that if you're paying this certain amount a month, you have access to all of this music indefinitely. But the problem is you never own any of it. So I chose to go the other way. I think part of the reason that people say that though is that they can't conceive enjoying the things that they already have. They always want to get something new, a new album, a new artist, and they need to move on to the next thing. And to do that, to have that music listening habit would be quite expensive. And if you follow a lot of current artists, it can become expensive if they're still releasing music and you have to purchase a digital or physical copy of that release each time it comes out. It does seem like a better deal to use Spotify that way, but I try to save my money as much as I can. I do buy albums that I didn't have before. You know, every couple of weeks or every month or two, I'll buy something and it'll be one album here or there if I can find it at a discounted price or something that seems fair to me. But what I found about not having an infinite music catalog, having my limited few hundred albums that I have digitally, is that I've delved back into older albums that I haven't been listening to for a long time. And I feel that I'm the better for it. Old Kiss albums, movie soundtracks. Has anybody heard the Knight's Tale soundtrack? That's a great one. And even artists like Papa Roach, they did one of the opening songs for WWE at one point, and that song is just a banger. It's called To Be Loved. I haven't listened to that in the longest time, and I've been spinning it more and more since I haven't had Spotify, and that song just gets me wired. The thing is, having Spotify and its infinite catalog of music available to you at all times, I was constantly listening to the newest thing. I wasn't staying with an artist for long, and artists that I used to listen to in the past, I usually just left them in the past. But sometimes some of that stuff from the past is just fine in the present and honestly quite enjoyable. It can honestly be a blast from the past because you have a nostalgia for that music. So digging up an older album that I have nostalgia for is really such a blast from the past. And it's something that I'm not sure if I would do as much if I had something like a streaming service. So moving on to the third way that ditching Spotify has changed my music habits is that I'm now actively seeking out the artists that I'm going to listen to, not having it fed to me by an algorithm. Because I don't have Spotify's famed Discover Weekly playlist serving me up the best recommendations that the algorithm can find, I have to go and look for music on my own. And I think having that personalized experience where I'm actually active in gathering the music that I'm going to listen to, rather than being more of a passive consumer, is something that is an important thing to highlight, and it's something that I want more of in my life. Because there's no algorithm feeding me recommendations, I'm left to seek out new artists for myself. So there's a few different ways that I find new music to listen to, and I'm going to make a separate video about that because there's honestly a lot of different ways in which you can do that without having to rely on something like Spotify to recommend music for you. A few of my favorite ways though is reading things like subreddits on certain genres of music that you like. Like for example, if you like garage punk or garage rock, you're going to find a subreddit for that where you're going to find tons of recommendations from fans. If you're on social media, you can follow the artist that you like on something like Instagram, and you can see what that artist is up to and the people that they're associating with. Oftentimes artists are playing shows or just shouting out fellow musicians who are in the genre as they are, and if you follow them closely, you're going to get recommendations right from the source. Using various social media channels for good is key here. There's a lot of value to be found in things like Instagram and YouTube in this respect. On Instagram, I follow an account called Earfeeder, and Earfeeder lists a lot of alternative music recommendations. They'll take a genre and they'll have a multi-panel post that they make here where they recommend tons of seminal albums for that genre as well as multiple new recommendations as well. It's a great way to find all types of alt music. So if you're into that kind of stuff, check out Earfeeder on Instagram. I also listen to a lot of kind of alternative, I guess modern traditional country artists like Colter Wall or Willie Carlisle or Nick Shoulders or Sierra Farrell. For further recommendations on music of this genre, I follow certain YouTube channels like Western AF and Gems on VHS. They have tons of different live off the floor recordings of these artists and new artists as well, and it's a great place to find new music and genres like that. I guess the theme here is that these are all people who are recommending these artists to me. No longer is a computer algorithm giving me my music suggestions. I'm crowdsourcing them from people, and I think that's a good way to go. Now, I'm not going to say that the algorithm on Spotify isn't good. It's in fact quite good, and I've gotten a lot of really good recommendations from there. However, I don't think this is a bad way to go either, is actually crowdsourcing this information from the community of listeners. I think nowadays with things like Netflix and even things like YouTube, more and more of the choices of the content that we consume is being decided by algorithms, but not enough by ourselves and by like-minded individuals, people who we actually share a lot of things in common with. A lot of the value that I get from using the internet is finding community and getting to that community, tapping into that wide array of knowledge of people who listen to similar things or things that I might like is a great way for me to find out about new artists and things that I hadn't heard about. Lastly, I want to give one more suggestion for where I find some of my more old-timey kind of, I guess, like foundational artists to a genre, and that is by reading the genre's Wikipedia page. And I'm not joking, that's actually a good way to go. If you look up folk music on Wikipedia or something more specific, like Canadian folk music, for example, you can go to the history chapter and go to the very beginning, and you can find some of the key artists who were foundational in forming that genre. A good example of somebody who I found through reading about on Wikipedia was the artist Scrapper Blackwell. He's an old blues musician. I think he's the originator of the track Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. Eric Clapton did a famous version of it as well. That's somebody who I learned of completely from Wikipedia, and I ended up buying a compilation album of his digitally, and I love his music. John Fahey is another example who I found out about through reading on Wikipedia as well. I think that time I was going down a hyperlink rabbit hole on Wikipedia where I started with folk, and then I went into a more niche, like traditional folk or new traditional folk revival or something like that, and I ended up getting to him. I might not have found that through Spotify, and even if I did, I like the story. I like the origin story, right? It's like, I don't mean to diss on people who meet people online, but it's like, how did you guys meet? And you say, oh, we met online. The alternative of that is, how did you guys meet? And then there's this really nice organic story. I saw her at the country fair. She was coming through the crowd. She had a cotton candy in her hand, and we locked eyes, and that's when I knew we were going to be together forever. Now, that's not how I found John Fahey or Scrapper Blackwell. It's not that romantic, unfortunately, but I like saying my story of I was reading about the genre on Wikipedia, then I went through a few hyperlinks and I found it. It's a little bit better than, oh, X on Spotify, the AI DJ recommended it to me. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter. If you get a lot of value out of Spotify, then keep listening to Spotify and enjoy it. I personally just didn't want to pay the cost, and I wanted to know that the music that I was listening to was music that I was going to have whether or not I continued to pay in the future. Sure, I miss having access to certain tracks that I would have had if I kept Spotify because I can't afford to buy all of them at this point, but I can still listen to them on YouTube and other free sources if I want to, and that's okay with me. So I hope you guys found that interesting. Just 3 ways that I've noticed my music habits have changed a little bit since I got rid of Spotify in the last few months. What did you guys think of this video? Have you had a similar experience in getting rid of streaming services in your life? Let me know in the comments section. I'd be happy to hear from you. But also, if you're enjoying Spotify, I'd be happy to hear from you as well. So let me know either way. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.